Get the best out of the markets again. You have witnessed it in 2016. 2018. 2021. Kotak Equity Colloquium is back. One of India's largest knowledge sharing platform on the markets. The Kotak Equity Colloquium. From Kotak Mutual Fund, India's 5th largest mutual fund. Join the biggest names in the industry. Gain knowledge from their market insights. Get trends and analysis and the forecast for the future. Use their experience and share it with your investors. Deep dive into sectors which will drive the future, which may help you grow your money like never before. Get brand new perspectives and all the tools you need to grow your business. Inviting you to join the Kotak Equity Colloquium.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to our monthly series, Equity Colloquium, where each month we have been coming to you with our teams of experts to give you a perspective on various sectors. We started this program in November 2020, and thank you for your regular participation during the past 12 months for this event. This month, we shall cover the NBFC sector. We have with us, as always, our panel led by Mr. Harsha Upadhyay, a CIO and Head of Equities, Shivani Kurian, Head of Research and Senior Portfolio Manager, Umang Shah, who covers this particular sector. Many of forums, we keep getting questions on various sectors. Where are we overweight? Where are we underweight? What's our view on the various sectors? And through this particular platform, we share our views on the various sectors, give you all as much information as possible, and keep you all abreast in terms of how are we positioned in these various sectors across our portfolios. Keep sharing your feedback, which is very, very important. Over the last 12 months, you've been giving us constant feedback on how we could make this program more engaging, cover various more sectors. Which sectors would you like us to talk about in the future, maybe like next month or the month after that? Do give your feedback on that. And for all of this, all you need to do is to subscribe to Kotak Mutual Fund on our YouTube channel. And also do share this link with your family and friends if they think this is a very interesting forum where they can get a lot of information about various sectors and industries. Without not taking much time, friends, welcome. Thank you for being there with us today. And I'd like to now invite Harsha Upadhyay to take this session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. Good evening, friends. Hope all of you have been staying safe. Welcome to yet another edition of Equity Colloquium. This time around, we will be discussing NBFC segment. What is its future outlook? What are the risks in the sector? And possibly, we will also address some of the concerns or the queries that you may have on the sector. Before we start doing that, let me take a couple of minutes to talk about an event where all investors were focusing on, at least for past several weeks. I'm talking about last night's Fed decision in terms of taper program, as well as interest rate changes that are likely to happen as we go forward. I think clearly the stance that Fed has taken has been more hawkish than what everyone anticipated. Although the market reaction may not suggest that at this point of time, but we believe that it's too early to extrapolate what has happened on the first day post the decision to continue for the next few weeks or next few months. As far as Fed is concerned, clearly they have committed to taper much earlier than what they had intended earlier. So they are double pacing their taper program by reducing by about $30 billion every month. And also in terms of interest rate dot plot, to look at that, it is likely that you will see 3 interest rate hikes in the calendar year 2022, 3 more in 2023, and 2 more in 2024. I think clearly the signal is they're more worried on inflation rather than growth, despite Omicron affecting global economy at this point of time. I think it remains to be seen, especially since we are heading into a holiday season. We may not really see all the activity in the markets in the next few trading sessions. I think what happens in the beginning of 2022 would actually set pace for the entire year in terms of the direction of the market. I think until then, it will be more of a consolidation at these levels, or maybe a range-bound market that one can see. Coming to today's discussion topic, which is NBFC sector. Today we have got Shibani Kurian. I'm sure all of you know her. She has presented her views on the banking sector last year. Along with her today, we have Umang Shah, who tracks our NBFC segment in Kotak Mutual Fund, and he will be presenting his insights into the sector. He will talk about the regulatory landscape, the competitive landscape of NBFC segments, how various subsegments are currently positioned, who are the likely winners, which are the kind of business models one should be looking at, and various such issues. I'm sure the next 30 minutes that he's going to present his views would be worthwhile listening, and I'm sure that it will add a lot of value to all of you. And post that, all of us will be happy to address any of the queries that you may have. Over to you, Uma.
Thank you, Harsha. Good evening, friends, and thank you for joining us for this Equity Colloquium event. My name is Umang Shah. I am the Financials Analyst at Kotak Mutual Fund. Today, we are going to discuss about the NBFC sector, the sector which has been instrumental in achieving the financial inclusion goals and delivering the last mile credit to the population where banks have not been able to reach. The sector has been through a lot of turmoil in past few years, and today I will take you through the journey as to how the sector has emerged post the crisis. If you look at India's credit landscape today, as on March 21, the industry had about 139 lakh crore outstanding credit. However, if you dissect this, you will see that a bulk of the credit is provided by banks, and NBFCs formed anywhere between 22 to 23% of the outstanding industry credit. Now, why is this distinction between banks and NBFCs? So if you look at the left-hand side pyramid, in terms of number of NBFCs, there are quite a lot of NBFCs when we compare it with banks. However, most of these NBFCs are very niche in nature, and they target specific customer and product segments. And as a result of which, you will find that very few NBFCs have large balance sheets, unlike banks. And hence, if you look at the overall credit landscape, more than 75% of the outstanding credit is dominated by banks today. If you look at the sector dynamics, the sector is a very, very heterogeneous compared to banks. And when I say heterogeneous, there are different sort of NBFCs. And as I already highlighted, that most of these NBFCs are niche. And as a result of which, there are different segmentations which have been created within the overall NBFC sector. So some of the large segments that we have today, the first being the state-owned NBFCs, which are predominantly engaged in infrastructure financing activities. And typically they have exposure to state-owned entities. The second big segment that we have is housing finance companies, which predominantly provide mortgage financing services both to retail individual home buyers, as well as provide wholesale financing to developers as well. Auto financing NBFCs predominantly are engaged into financing purchase of vehicles, both new as well as used. And most of the NBFCs you will find today are also engaged into providing financing for commercial vehicles. Apart from that, we have a few smaller niche segments, which are like gold loan companies, where NBFCs provide loan against gold jewelry. We have microfinance NBFCs, where these entities provide very small ticket micro loans, especially to the customers which are at the bottom of the pyramid. And they operate under a very time-tested joint liability group model. And lastly, we have diversified NBFCs. NBFCs which predominantly have a combination of retail as well as wholesale borrowers and are present across multiple segments that I already discussed. Now, if you look at the evolution of the sector, you will find that if you look at the bottom left chart, right, I mean, NBFCs appear to be growing much faster compared to banks in terms of loan growth. However, we need to look at this data from two lenses. The first lens is obviously when we dissect and look at the overall NBFC sector and cut it across various segments, we find that state-owned NBFCs, which are PSU NBFCs, have been growing much faster given the fact that they provide large ticket infrastructure financing loans. So they are the ones which are driving the overall sector growth. And the second part is we need to cut it out between a pre-IL&FS and post-IL&FS period, where the growth for other NBFCs, which is housing finance companies as well as other NBFCs, has kind of moderated significantly in the post-IL&FS period. And we will be looking at some of the key factors as to what has changed post-IL&FS. If you look at, again, the overall mix of the NBFC credit pool today, right? As I already highlighted, state-owned NBFCs, housing finance companies, and auto finance NBFCs are predominant, have the dominant share in terms of the outstanding credit provided by NBFCs today. However, if we again try and split the growth between the pre and the post-IL&FS period, which is pre-FY19 and post-FY19, the growth has moderated considerably across all segments of NBFCs. Now, if you look at the sector evolution, during my opening remarks, as I already highlighted, that past few years have been fairly tumultuous and fairly turbulent for the sector. We have highlighted some of the key events which have impacted the sector in a major way. So starting from 2015, where the RBI mandated NBFCs to transition from 180 days past due NPL recognition to 90 days past due NPL recognition, this led to a big surge in terms of NPLs for NBFCs. 2016, a landmark year for nation as a whole, demonetization, and this impacted most of the NBFCs which are operating into the microfinance segment and are more rural focused, mainly dependent on cash collections. 2017 was the year of GST implementation, another landmark reform, but again, it impacted NBFCs who are predominantly focused on unorganized MSME and small business loan segment. 2018, which we call it as the defining year or the defining moment for NBFCs, the IL&FS crisis, right, where we saw a few casualties into the sector, and IL&FS being one amongst the large NBFCs which went under, and that had huge repercussions for the sector, which we will cover during the course of the presentation. But obviously, this led to a huge consolidation within the space. 2019 was the year where NBFCs transitioned to Ind AS accounting ahead of banks, which is again a precedent of sorts. And 2020, COVID-19 pandemic year, clearly, while everybody was, or rather all the businesses, financial as well as non-financial businesses, were impacted, we observed that NBFCs were kind of impacted a bit more compared to banks, given the kind of customer segment that they cater to. Now, IL&FS crisis, we call it a watershed moment for the sector. What changed after IL&FS? So I think two key things which we would like to highlight over here. So while we all know that during the IL&FS crisis, as I said, I mean, a couple of casualties happened within the sector, and there was a huge liquidity crunch post that, as a result of which the whole focus from all stakeholder perspective kind of shifted from assets to liabilities. So just to put it into perspective, prior to IL&FS crisis, I mean, NBFCs were kind of viewed as asset franchisees, but post the IL&FS crisis, the focus shifted completely to liabilities. And as you can see in the chart below, most of the money market borrowing instruments, which is predominantly commercial papers and NCDs, the proportion of that kept on shrinking, especially in terms of the liability mix. Most of the NBFCs which used to resort to short-term liabilities, borrowing short-term liabilities to fund longer tenor loans, did face some sort of a trouble. And clearly that is something which impacted the growth for the sector as well. If you look at the numbers here in detail, the overall commercial papers which are funded by mutual funds and which are issued by NBFCs, they peaked out pre-IL&FS closer to about July or August 2018 at about 1.6 lakh crores. And since then, it has been coming down. If you look at what replaced this sort of liquidity crunch for NBFCs, then we can see that the share of bank loans to NBFCs kind of kept on rising post the IL&FS crisis. So if you look, the share of bank credit to NBFCs in the overall bank credit pool, which used to hover around 5 to 6%, moved up to as high as 9 to 10% and is now kind of stabilizing at those levels. So clearly banks did provide a lot of liquidity support to NBFCs at that point in time. Secondly, the spotlight came on ownership. And why do I emphasize more on ownership is because as far as NBFCs are concerned, ownership does define the ability of the company to bring in additional capital as and when crisis hits you. So there are different sorts of ownership models that we are seeing for NBFCs, predominant ones, government-backed, the state-owned NBFCs. This probably is the segment of NBFCs which remain fairly insulated given the implicit sovereign sort of guarantee that they enjoy. The second sort of NBFCs, which are backed by large private equity players or large investors. And these sort of NBFCs you will typically find in the microfinance or the affordable housing segments. Clearly, these are again the players who have deep pockets and were able to bring in capital as and when required. The third segment is the NBFCs which are backed by large corporate houses or strong promoters, and predominantly we do find some of the NBFCs which are diversified or captive NBFCs, so to say, in this bucket, and they also kind of remain comfortable. Lastly, the segment which is smaller asset financing or diversified NBFCs were the ones which we find are in a vulnerable position post the IL&FS crisis, because in 3 years we saw two back-to-back major events, which was IL&FS crisis and COVID-19, which tested the ability of NBFCs to kind of originate capital or manage liquidity in crunch situations. So this is one segment which remained kind of fairly vulnerable post. Regulatory oversight. The regulatory landscape for NBFCs has been evolving for a fairly long period of time. As we also saw in the previous slides, since 2015, clearly there are quite a few changes which the RBI has kind of introduced for the NBFC sector. The clear intent of RBI is now to reduce the regulatory gap between banks and NBFCs as the sector is becoming larger and more interconnected. So from a systemic stability point of view, clearly NBFC has become a large sector which needs to be regulated more closely. And post IL&FS, the need for tighter regulatory oversight has only increased further. So what we have seen is large NBFCs, the regulatory oversight on large NBFCs has increased multifold post the IL&FS event. The recent regulatory guidelines where they are now classifying the NBFC sector or all the companies across four layers: top layer, upper layer, middle layer, and the base layer. Clearly the large NBFCs, bulk of the large NBFCs are falling into the upper layer and the middle layer category, which are going to be very closely scrutinized by the Reserve Bank of India, and the regulations are more bank-like. Now that clearly raises questions that what is going forward, is conversion into a bank an obvious way forward for large NBFCs? We believe this question probably will get answered once RBI provides more clarity in terms of showing a roadmap of how they are looking at the roadmap of conversion of these large NBFCs into banks. So clearly that is something which will happen. But in the meanwhile, one thing is very clear, that the Reserve Bank wants to gradually reduce the regulatory arbitrage between banks and NBFCs, and that is very much evident by the regulatory evolution which is happening at this point in time. COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, this is something which has kind of created a lot of impact on all the businesses and the economy as a whole. Now, how did it impact the NBFC sector? Now, if we look, there were two major aspects where NBFCs got impacted because of COVID-19. And the first one being on the growth front. Now, what we have tried to do is we have tried to dissect and segregate the data and see the impact specifically for different segments, given the fact that the heterogeneity at the overall sector level does color the consolidated numbers. So if you look at the auto financing NBFCs, the bottom left chart kind of clearly reflects the the trend or the momentum in disbursements, which got impacted during the first wave and the second wave of COVID-19 virus surge, which led to lockdowns. And clearly, we can see that the impact in terms of asset growth was more pronounced for auto financing NBFCs versus housing finance NBFCs. So if you look at the overall balance sheet or loan growth, the AUMs for major auto financing NBFCs are still, even after the pickup that we have seen in past few quarters, are probably at par or at levels or marginally higher compared to what we used to see in a pre-COVID period, with a couple of exceptions. However, if the situation is kind of a little different when we look at housing finance companies, because I mean, if you look at the AUMs for housing finance and the affordable housing finance companies, the AUMs have still steadily grown during the COVID period as well. If you look at it from an asset quality perspective, again, if you look at the credit cost, so I mean, no wonder the overall pool of stress assets kind of increased for auto financing as well as the housing finance companies. But again, the impact was more pronounced for auto financing NBFCs, with the exception of a few players. Whereas for housing finance companies, barring a few quarters of last fiscal and the current fiscal year, there is not material deterioration in terms of the credit cost that we have seen for housing finance companies. So how do we evaluate opportunities in a sector which is so niche? So we do evaluate opportunities based on a framework which looks at multiple factors. And what are these factors, which I will quickly run you through. The first and foremost is the right to win. Again, and at the cost of repetition, we do believe that NBFCs continue to remain niche plays. And to that extent, they need to establish their right to win, given the fact that the whole lending space is fairly competitive, with number of banks, number of NBFCs, and now even the fintech players competing with some of these incumbent players. NBFCs need to establish their right to win. And we believe that there are certain segments which are cut out for NBFCs and certain segments which are cut out for banks, where each of these players have an upper hand over each other. So if you look at the segments like commercial vehicle financing, especially to small fleet operators and small road transport operators, affordable housing segment, gold loans, microfinance, these are the segments which are more suitable, or where NBFCs might be better placed compared to banks. The second key factor, which we believe has gained extreme prominence in last few years, is ownership and liquidity. So ability of the promoters or ability of the owners to bring in capital during uncertain times, which provides comfort to other stakeholders and investors. And also NBFCs which manage a very well diversified and a duration matched liability mix will definitely be better placed compared to the others. So clearly this particular factor gains a lot of weightage from that perspective. Increasing regulatory oversight. And we believe as regulations become tighter and tighter, larger NBFCs will definitely face more scrutiny, but also will be in a better position to kind of cope up with the compliance burden, where we believe that for smaller NBFCs, they might find it difficult, because gradually as the regulatory arbitrage becomes narrower and narrower, the advantage in favor of smaller NBFCs also diminishes. So to that extent, larger NBFCs are well positioned. And lastly, depending on the segment that we are looking at, obviously there are certain macro tailwinds that we need to look at, because most of these lending businesses tend to be cyclical in nature, and clearly we need to evaluate those factors. So clearly there are two big sectors and macro factors affecting these sectors, which I will take you through. So for housing finance segment, clearly there are macro tailwinds, and the sector is now coming out of a big consolidation phase. So if you look at the housing sector, clearly after a lull of quite a few years, clearly post-COVID, I mean, there has been a renewed demand in terms of new homes, and there are quite a few factors which are kind of supporting this demand. If you look at the interest rates today, we are currently seeing lowest ever mortgage rates, which is clearly which has made the product fairly affordable, and as a result of which the differential between the rental yield and the mortgage rate has kind of narrowed significantly. That definitely nudges the home buyer to tilt in favor of buying a new home rather than renting it out. If you look at the home prices, clearly home prices have remained stable for quite a few years, barring a few micro markets where prices might have appreciated. But if you look at by and large, most of the markets have seen prices remaining stable. And given the fact that fresh supply was fairly muted in last few years, the absorption rates have kind of only improved, which also provides confidence that prices are unlikely to moderate from here going forward. So as a combination of all these factors, clearly we believe housing sector has macro tailwinds, and clearly the outlook looks better. As far as the auto finance sector is concerned, auto finance obviously is a derivative of how the auto sector performs. And over here, clearly in terms of penetration, India still lags its global peers, whether developed or developing nations, in terms of the penetration of either if you look at passenger cars or we look commercial vehicles, clearly the penetration remains lower. However, I would like to qualify over here that in the passenger segment, clearly banks do play a dominant role, especially in the salaried passenger vehicle financing segment, whereas the self-employed category NBFCs do have a decent market share. But the passenger segment definitely does remain fairly dominated by banks. As far as the commercial segment is concerned, commercial vehicles do remain predominantly dominant by NBFCs. And if you look at the table below, clearly the commercial vehicle segment also had its fair share of consolidation in last few years, which is reflected in the sale numbers. If you look at the year-to-date numbers, clearly the growth appears to be a bit astronomical, given the fact that the base was fairly muted. But despite these sort of growth, I mean, the industry remains fairly below the peak numbers the industry witnessed during FY18 and FY19. Sorry, and as the economy opens up, the post-pandemic revival in the economic activity, our senses will increase demand for commercial vehicles, which augurs well for auto financiers. If you look at the profitability and the valuation perspective, right? I mean, one of the key questions that we do keep getting asked is about the competition from banks and the profitability of NBFCs kind of coming under question. Again, if you look at the sector as a whole, clearly the competitive intensity has been huge, be it auto financing or housing finance, but there are players who have been able to consistently deliver on a very sustainable return on equity. And as you can see in the charts below, over a 10-year period, despite all the regulatory changes that have come through in the sector, despite all the macro events which I discussed, the likes of IL&FS, demonetization, GST, and COVID, barring the COVID period, of course, there are players who have been consistently able to deliver a sustainable return on equity for shareholders, and that is what is getting rewarded. So if you look at the price to book value multiple chart above, there is a clear distinction in terms of the multiples that the market is ascribing to consistent performers versus companies which are lagging. Similarly, if you look at the housing finance segment, again, a similar trend is what we are seeing. Now, housing finance is a peculiar situation where multiples have definitely derated from the peak that we would have seen maybe a decade ago or even a few years ago. But that is also an outcome of the fact that the space has only become intensely competitive by banks. And as I also highlighted that in the prime mortgage market, clearly banks do enjoy a dominant market share versus housing finance companies. And as a result of which, if you look at the long-term profitability trend, either in the form of ROAs or ROEs, clearly there is a moderation, which is reflecting in the long-term valuations as well. So in terms of outlook, we clearly believe that the auto finance and the housing finance segments are kind of well positioned at this point in time. For auto finance, clearly the CV cycle is kind of bottoming out, and with revival in the activity, we believe the commercial vehicle financing NBFCs are better placed. On the passenger side, I think one key factor that we need to look at, and which will be more relevant for banks as well as NBFCs, is the chip shortage issue. The resolution of chip shortage issue will be very critical for that matter. As far as housing finance is concerned, clearly increasing demand for own houses, lowest ever mortgage rates, government incentives to the real estate sector, and stable real estate prices, all of which kind of augur really well for the sector. But nevertheless, our view is that affordable housing NBFCs are better off compared to large NBFCs, given the competition in the prime mortgage space. Gold finance companies tend to benefit when gold prices are stable, and that's a very crucial element, both from growth as well as asset quality perspective. And although there is some increase in competition that we are seeing in the gold finance segment from banks, but clearly the customer segment that banks as well as gold financing NBFCs cater to are materially different. So to that extent, gold financing NBFCs should remain comfortably placed. Microfinance is one segment where we continue to remain cautious, because this is the segment which caters to the customers which are predominantly at the bottom of the pyramid, and obviously are the most vulnerable. So historically also we would have seen that during periods like demonetization, also during IL&FS crisis, these companies tend to get impacted the most. So although these companies appear to be coming out of the COVID shock from wave 1 and wave 2, and growth appears to be coming back, asset quality appears to be stabilizing, I think the key risk over here is that if there is a third COVID wave and there is a resurgence of the virus, clearly it can impair their growth as well as asset quality outlook. So one needs to be cautious on this particular segment. Fintech. No discussion today ends without discussion on disruption from fintech players. And what we have tried to see is basically how this fintech ecosystem plays have emerged, right? So most of these fintech plays that we are viewing as major disruptors, most of them have been payment players who have acquired customers via their payments business, and over a period of time have branched out or have seen a natural progression to lending, either into the buy now pay later, more famously called as BNPL, or unsecured personal loans. And there is another offshoot, which is the unsecured business loans or merchant loans, as we call it. Now, in fact, we feel that fintech partnerships actually could be an opportunity for NBFCs. Could be an opportunity for NBFCs as against disruption. And a few reasons why we believe so is that clearly we don't really see a risk of flight of customers when NBFCs partner with fintech, is because the kind of customer segment that NBFCs cater to. So NBFC customer segment is predominantly very niche and not a very digital or tech savvy, or not necessarily a very digital or tech savvy sort of a customer, which is a typical fintech customer, which are predominantly millennials or very tech savvy consumers. Also, fintech partnerships can help augment customer acquisition for NBFCs. NBFCs do have an ability to assume balance sheet risk, which today quite a few fintech players don't really have, and as a result of which they are entering into the partnership model with NBFCs as far as the lending business goes. And lastly, clearly NBFCs already have a strong collections infrastructure in place, which also puts them in a sweet spot, which a lot of these fintech players are either developing or are yet to develop. So clearly fintech partnerships could be an opportunity for NBFCs. So what are the key risks for the sector? I think some of the key risks are clearly interest rates. We are seeing early signs of interest rates kind of bottoming out. There are a couple of NBFCs or banks who have started to raise their lending rates and deposit rates. Clearly rising interest rates, or rather to put it more specifically, the pace of increase in the interest rate will be very crucial to watch out for from a margin perspective for NBFCs. Liquidity. In last 3 years, we have seen two major shocks, which is IL&FS and COVID-19. If there is any other major shock for the sector, clearly that could create significant liquidity related challenges. So one has to remain very cognizant of this fact. Resurgence of COVID-19 infections. So once again, there are discussions around a resurgence in new variant of COVID-19 virus, and clearly that is something that we need to be cognizant of. Clearly, the recovery so far is fragile, and if there is a very sharp resurgence like we saw during the second wave of COVID-19 infections, that could be a major risk for the sector recovery. From a regulatory perspective, I have already highlighted the regulatory oversight is only likely to increase in our view. So NBFCs need to be prepared for that eventuality. And lastly, in terms of competition, which is kind of all pervasive from banks as well as from fintech players. So how do we look at the sector, and what's the approach that we are taking over here is very selective and stock specific. So as I already highlighted, that the sector itself is fairly diversified and heterogeneous in nature. So we can't really have a one size fits all sort of approach. And also the sector recovery is pretty much fragile at this point in time. So we take a very selective and a stock specific approach. Within different segments, we do prefer segment leaders who have got a very strong parentage and a proven execution track record. Given the fact that they have been able to emerge stronger through various business cycles and the macro cycles, clearly puts them in a stronger position as and when the growth cycle revives. Also, from a competition standpoint, diversified NBFCs are better placed, especially the ones which are dominant in the retail lending segment, given the fact that on the wholesale side, the pricing power for NBFCs remains fairly low. So especially on the consumer lending side, the NBFCs who have got stronger dominant position, and the ones who are investing in technology to stay ahead of competition, clearly they are the ones which should be preferred. On the housing finance space, we remain constructive, but we are playing this through banks which have a dominant share in the prime mortgage segment. In the auto financing space, again, our preference is for players who have got a strong parentage and very strong balance sheet in terms of capital and liquidity position. So as and when growth opportunities present themselves, they should be able to capitalize on it. And lastly, microfinance, I would like to reiterate that this is one segment where we continue to remain cautious for the risks which I have already highlighted. So that's from my end, and thank you so much for patient listening.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.